Hello, everyone. Zerkalda back here again, and apologies for the long hiatus. Life has really simply just gotten in the way for me on a lot of subjects. But in today's episode, I wanted to do something a little different and do a deep dive on a show that really does not need much of an introduction: The Rings of Power, Amazon's just abomination of a Lord of the Rings series. And I wanted to talk about something very specific: the dialogue. I sat through the first season and recorded down various lines and pieces that were said, and I want to go over why the dialogue really just does not work in this show. Over every line, either from a lore perspective, as being accurate to Tolkien's work, or even just from the show itself, if we were to ignore canon and try to look at these lines from the show, because for me, a lot of people have mentioned the dialogue or they've touched on it, but none have really gone into it in the way I would feel satisfied with. So for that, I'm going to take it upon myself to do so. And we're going to go over the first episode's dialogue in this video. As you can see here, I've also got an index for these certain characters who are supposed to be canonical, but they are so far divorced from what they are in the actual lore that I simply have to use a different name because I cannot associate these characters with who they are in Tolkien's world. And below that, you can also see the episode statistics. This is a record I made as I was working on the episodes, and I started trying to see how much dialogue exactly each episode racked up. And you can see as it goes on, it gets long and then has a brief moment of brevity, then it just goes absolutely off the rails. And as we go through these episodes, you'll see why. But without further ado, let's get into the dialogue of the very first episode. Now, I want to preface that these lines are not altered. These are the original lines from the show. I sat down and, as I said, recorded these down bit by bit, word by word, punctuation mark by punctuation mark. So this is the dialogue as it's presented in the show. And the first line I noted down here was from Karen, or Galadriel, saying, "It's not going to float, it's going to sail." This is in reference to her swan ship, the paper boat that she makes. And this is such a strange line because for something to sail, it has to float. She's basically just saying it's not going to do X, it's going to do Y, but X and Y are pretty much the exact same thing. So it's such an oxymoronic statement for her to make. And yet this is supposed to be a profound piece of moment for her. The next line that I highlighted is from her brother Finbro, or Finrod, as he's supposed to be. And it's the very memed upon part where he goes, "Do you know why a ship floats and a stone cannot? Because the stone sees only downward. The darkness of the water is vast and irresistible. The ship feels the darkness as well, striving moment by moment to master her and pull her under. But the ship has a secret, for unlike the stone, her gaze is not downward but up, fixed upon the light that guides her, whispering of grander things than darkness ever knew." This is it is such a run-on where you're taking a metaphor and dragging it out to just painful levels. And it's also, from the lore perspective, it's very hilarious to see this line because the fixed upon the light that guides her, which the elves, of course, the only thing this could refer to would be the stars, because in Tolkien's canon, since the trees are around, there is no sun, there's no moon, there's only the trees and the stars, but you wouldn't be able to see the stars if you're in Valinor. So how this exactly works, I don't know. And the writers certainly did not put any thought into that either. But it gets even better because Karen's response is, "But sometimes the lights shine just as brightly reflected in the water as they do in the sky. It's hard to say which way is up and which way is down. How am I to know which lights to follow? This is something that is supposed to be profound. You know they wanted to make this sound profound, but this is something that it's so straightforward, simple. It's as simple as saying someone where it's like, well, what if I forget how to breathe? Where it's just you just breathe. This is such a dumb thing to say that you have no response. There is no way to respond to this because it's such a dumb statement to make. But you can't tell which way is up and down. Where again, the metaphor is trying so hard to be profound that it only circles back to being utterly stupid. And of course, Finbro whispers something to her, and they don't reveal what that is yet. But we'll get to it. And she then says, but that seems so simple. And he then responds, the most important truths often are. But you must learn to discern them for yourself. I won't always be here to speak them to you. You won't? Finrod is so obviously alluding to that he's gonna die, but why? What would prompt him to believe in this? Now, in the lore, Finrod does have one moment of clairvoyance where he has an ability to momentarily see the future, but this is in reference to his death in the quest for Beren and Luthien, and it's ironic that in that scene, he's still also talking to his sister Galadriel. So they seem, if I was being generous, I'd say they were borrowing from that, but this is such an on-the-nose thing, and to say this in the days of bliss in Valinor is so bizarre. Especially again because of the concept of death would be foreign to most elves. The only elf who has canonically died at any point in this timeline is their who I'm forgetting her name, the first wife of Finwë the King. Her Feanor's mother. She's the only elf at this point who has canonically died. And her death was simply a matter of childbirth complications, not something that would ever happen to Finrod for obvious reasons. So why Finrod is talking here and alluding that Galadriel will one time be without him and his guidance is perplexing, to say the least, and very on the nose, because it immediately telegraphs to you, oh, he's gonna die right away. And so then he then goes off to the two trees, telling her mother and father are waiting. And of course, that's where we then get another long monologue that is very painful. And it goes, from Karen, we had no word for death. Which, again, is strange because the elves, while death would be a strange concept, they would not be unfamiliar with it. It is something they have some experience with, even though it has only happened once. So again, they would have a word for it. They should have a word, at the least. And then they go, for we thought our joys would be unending. That's true to an extent, but depending on when this was taking place, was it during the unrest of Feanor, or was that before the unrest? And then they go, we thought our light would never dim. And this is supposed to be referencing the two trees. Which, it's strange for Galadriel to refer to it as our light, because the trees were not the elves' creation. The light did not belong to the elves. In fact, this was an entire point of dispute over the Silmarils, was that Feanor, while he created the Silmarils, the light within, the light that gave them their beauty, was not his. He had no real claim to that light. But he certainly had a claim to the creation of the Silmarils, so it became a point of dispute. But here, Galadriel is saying it's our light, which again is very strange. The next sentence goes, So when the great foe Morgoth destroyed the very light of our home, we resisted, and a legion of elves went to war. This is that sequence where you have that pathetic, brief glimpse of a shadowed impression of Morgoth, and that's it. And then you see the elves doing a round table style of swearing an oath, and it obviously it's supposed to recall the Oath of Feanor, but it can't be that because Finrod is there. And Finrod never swore the oath. So why he's there, that's what that is supposed to be, I don't know. And yet the Oath of Feanor took place because of later on revelations down the line, or things that are alluded to. And it only goes on worse. So the Legion of Elves went to war. Yes, that's true. But then it goes, we left our Valinor, our home, and journeyed to a distant realm, one filled with untold perils and strange creatures beyond count, a place known as Middle Earth. So, while yes, they did leave to go to war in the lore, there was a lot more to it. There was, of course, the first kinslaying, the burning of the ships. There was a lot that went into this, and it's skipped over. If you are watching this and you have no knowledge of the lore, it seems that the elves just were absolutely perfect behavior in their responses to the situation, which canonically they didn't. And we cannot say, well, maybe that didn't happen because Galadriel in episode 5 will allude to such actions. So, canonically, yes, these things did happen. Or did they not? I don't know, because the show refuses to fully commit to one story. Instead, it will play both sides. And second, the part where they talk about journeying to a distant realm and calling Valinor our home. One filled with, and all of this, a place known as Middle-earth. The elves, of course, anyone who's read the lore knows the elves originally came from Middle-earth. Valinor was not their original home. It would be more correct for Galadriel to have said, it was my home, as in her home, because Galadriel did not see Middle-earth at all. She only heard about it from Feanor when he made his speech against the Valar and encouraged them to go to war. So if she had said, I left Valinor and journeyed to a distant realm, that would make more sense. That would be accurate. But not we left our home and journeyed to a distant realm, and then a place known as Middle-earth. Because, again, there are elves living still who know about Middle-earth. The first generation of elves was born in Middle-earth. So this is, again, it's applying it to all the elves is inaccurate. But then it goes on to saying, they said it would be over quickly. Who is they in this case? Is it Feanor? Because Feanor is the one who made that promise, but Feanor is one person, and yet they won't name him at all. So I don't know who's the they, and this is something that's going to happen again later on in this very same speech. Because, again, who are they in this case? And they said the war left Middle-earth in ruin and would last centuries. That's more accurate. Yes, that's true. And then it goes, now we learned many words for death. Okay? Again, that's partially true, but also partially not. In the end, Morgoth would be defeated, but not before much sorrow. This starts to feel like it's repeating itself. Somehow this speech is running in on itself, because they already said the war left Middle-earth in ruin, we were told it would end quickly, it lasted centuries, and we learned many words for death. So yes, we understand, but you're repeating yourself now, saying but not before much sorrow. It's as if you don't trust us to be intelligent with this dialogue. And then it goes on, for his orcs had spread to every corner of Middle-earth, multiplying ever greater under the command of his most devoted servant, a cruel and cunning sorcerer. They called him Sauron. Again, who is they? Who is they? You say this as if it's not the elves calling him Sauron, even though Sauron is the name the elves gave him. Among other names, of course, but Sauron is the most well known, because it's the one that was in the original books. And calling him a cruel and cunning sorcerer, the show never properly establishes Sauron's nature as a Maiar, a fallen angel. It never does this. This is, in fact, the only indication it'll give you to what he even is. So he's just a cruel and cunning sorcerer, with whatever that entails. But then it gets worse, because then she says, my brother vowed to seek him out and destroy him, but Sauron found him first and marked his flesh with his symbol. In just the first sentence alone, and the second one, the entire lore and backstory of the First Age has been thrown right out the window, because Finrod in the books, obviously, he does not die after Morgoth's defeat, like this show tries to assert. Finrod died well into around the middle of the First Age, essentially. And he died in the quest of Beren and Luthien, saving Beren from a werewolf in a very heroic final battle. And instead here, he apparently survived the fall of Morgoth, which marks the end of the First Age. And he went out seeking Sauron to destroy him, which, if you even if we want to say, well, maybe that took place before Morgoth's defeat, which, again, the dialogue does not agree with that reading. However, even then, Finrod did not vow to seek out and destroy Sauron. That was not what he promised. He promised to aid Beren in his quest, and it was pure coincidence and unhappy circumstance that Finrod's path crossed with Sauron. So why? But then, of course, also, if Finrod survived, then how did the quest of Beren and Luthien go then? And also, what happened to Nargothrond? Did the tale of Turin Turambar go differently? Because remember, Finrod's death had big ramifications on the fate of Nargothrond, with Orodreth, or no, not Orodreth, Orifer, being in command in his place when Turin arrived. So the entire history now is up for grabs. Because if Finrod was alive, then either A, he somehow survived all of those things and they happened differently, or B, my best guess would be he somehow escaped the sacking of Nargothrond by Glaurung, and he was there for that, which, again, I don't know how that would go down, but it wouldn't go down as depicted in the books. So, again, the entire history of the First Age was just thrown out the window there. And then it goes, but Sauron found him first and marked his flesh with a symbol, one whose meaning even our wisest could not discern. The irony of this statement is that the symbol just needed to be rotated by 90 degrees, and they would have figured it out. Because it's not an eye, it's a map of Mordor. And apparently none of the elves could figure that out. And there's also the curiosity of that Sauron found Finrod. Like, why would Sauron find Finrod if Smorgoth's defeated? That he was counter hunting Finrod, or what was going on? That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I'll talk about the symbol in just a little bit too. And this is then where we get to something very crucial to Galadriel's ish character, and a big issue I have with her character as well. Because she then says here, "And there in the darkness his vow became mine, and so we hunted. To the end of the earth we hunted Sauron, but the trail grew thin." So before I get into the rest of this speech, this establishes that Galadriel did not take up the sword until after Finrod's death in the show. Canonically speaking, in the Rings of Power, Galadriel does not take up the sword until after Finrod's death, which in the show took place after Morgoth was overthrown and defeated. So she has no battle experience whatsoever. She has not been in war. She has not commanded armies or been a leader or even trained before this took place. And yet the show is going to assert that she's not only the greatest warrior who ever lived, but she even has titles. The warrior of the wastelands and scourge of the orcs. But then how does she gain these titles if there was no great battles left to fight? She only joined after these things. It's essentially stolen valor. But everyone's going to act like this is accurate. And in fact, it would have been nice if they had bothered to even show her being trained. Maybe by her Finrod, give us some time to build on this relationship. But of course they don't. Because that's just Hollywood, how we write our females now. And a lot of our characters, we don't bother showing them learning at all. They're just amazing off the bat. So they hunted to the end of the earth. We hunted Sauron. The trail grew thin. Year gave way to year. Century gave way to century. This is more hilarious in hindsight because we now know, thanks to Season 2, Galadriel is the commander of the Northern armies, so the northern region of Middle-earth is her domain. And we found out that Sauron was hiding out in the unfrozen Fordwaith, and when he got Caesared in Season 2's prologue, which takes place at the dawn of the Second Age, he exploded and caused the entire region to be covered in ice, in a frozen wasteland that has lasted 1,000 years. And yet apparently Galadriel never bothered to search this area. For 1,000 years, she looked everywhere else except her own zone of influence, her own zone of command in the north. The the fact that she's this incompetent at tracking is no surprise if you think that, well, she has no experience. But no, the show's going to treat her like has a ton of experience, even though her search has been fruitless for 1,000 years. And then it gets weird, because it says, "And for many elves, the pain of those days passed out of thought and mind. More and more of our kind began to believe that Sauron was but a memory, and that the threat at last was ended. I wish I could be one of them." Okay, so elves live forever. Their memories don't dim. They don't forget. So if there's a threat like Sauron running around, they're not going to just forget and write him off as defeated when they had no way of tracking him. And this is after they know that he was commanding orcs and legions, and he already murdered one of them, a leader among them. In the books, of course, Sauron flees far into the east, and he had also already abandoned Morgoth's army when he was overthrown by Huon and Luthien. So he was out of the picture for a very, very long time. So it was reasonable there for the elves not to concern themselves with him. In here, no, he's been active, and he's been demonstrably so. They have actual proof of his activity. And yet the elves are just, we haven't seen him, so it's probably fine. And that, again, that is not how elves would react to this situation without definitive actual proof. Then we get the sequence of Galadriel and her company looking in the frozen forward wave. Again, a region that they really should have been checking first, given what season 2 revealed, but they're only doing so now. And an elf asks a very curious question, asking, how long can living flesh endure where even sunlight fears to tread? This is such a weird line for an elf to say, because elves don't need sunlight to be living flesh. They were born without sunlight. They lived for a long time without the sun. They lived under starlight, and even then, if we ignore elves, dwarves live underground without sunlight. Orcs live underground without sunlight. There are many creatures that live without sunlight. This is such a bizarre statement. I understand what they were trying to suggest here, but it does not work if it being uttered by an elf. What would have made more sense is that if they had said something like along the lines of, "How long can we endure here where the cold bites even our flesh?" Establishing the fact that, and this would be canonically correct, that elves can endure the cold and other extremes much more hardy than other creatures of Middle Earth. So that would again accomplish that this is so cold that even the hardy elves, who normally do not feel cold, are affected. But no, it's how long can living flesh endure where even sunlight fears to tread. It's a line that's trying to be poetic, but it's just stupid. But again, it doesn't work being uttered by an elf. And they find the fortress, and of course the elf says, "Oh, my hand has lost all feeling." And Karen just asserts that, "No, this place is so evil, our torches give no warmth." This line is done purely to establish something for later on in regards to Methdolf, who, of course, if no surprise, was their attempt at writing Gandalf into the Second Age. And this line exists purely to establish, oh, well, if it's so cold that fire gives no warmth, that's evil. But then this doesn't make any sense, because obviously Methdolf isn't Simpron. He isn't evil. So why later on, and again, I'll talk about this later on, but this line makes no sense, safe to say, in light of what came later. This line is now actually completely nonsensical. Then they go with this line too, where even stone cannot hide the mark of one whose very hand is flame unquenched. This is referencing a moment where Karen saw a snowflake fall onto a forging anvil, and it burned. And so she sees that it's the Eye of Sauron, the sigil, the map of Mordor. But this then contradicts what was just said earlier, which is evil is deathly cold, and yet now we're saying, no, 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 actually evil is so hot that even stone can't hide it. So which one is it? Is evil cold, or is it warm? Which one is it? Especially in regards to Sauron. But then it gets funnier, because she then says, once she sees the mark, she says, "This mark was left as a trail for orcs to follow. The last time I saw it was on my brother." I I tell you, they did not read these two sentences back to back, because they'd realize how nonsensical that sounds. So Karen has seen the mark, and she asserts it's a trail. The last time she saw it was on her brother. Sweetheart, your brother wasn't part of some trail. So how do you know that this is a trail? How do you know that that's what this is? It could just be a calling card, for all you know. But these two sentences are so moronic when you slap them together. And again, just a moment of thought, and you realize, wait, that doesn't make any sense. How did you reach that conclusion? How'd you reach this conclusion that it's a trail based on the fact that you saw it on your brother's corpse? The corpse you recovered. Yeah, it just keeps going. And this isn't a line. What comes next is a line from one of those weird humans who we got no elaboration on, who are walking around in the grasslands with those big moose antlers strapped to their back. And this line isn't necessarily bad for any lore reason, it's just such a bizarre line because it goes, "World strange, if I let him pitch kettle me, I'd never get off me bar stool." Who talks like this in Middle Earth? No one in Middle Earth talks like this. In fact, I'm pretty sure most people in our world don't talk like this. So, why are you talking like this? But this isn't going to be the first line where we're just random rattling off really stupid stuff. Next line I noted down was coming from Nori. And this is just one of those lines where, again, you're trying to say something profound and motivational, something that should go on a poster, really. And you just sound stupid. Because she goes, "If we didn't do everything we weren't supposed to do, we'd hardly do anything at all." If we did not do everything we were not supposed to. So if you did do everything you were supposed to, you'd do stuff? What? Again, it's one of these lines where it's just, this is not, no one who if you talk like this, you'd realize, oh wait, I sound like an idiot. No, I sound like an idiot. Because that's the stupid accent. They're all really thick accented. But yeah, it's a really dumb line. And it's not the first one. And again, it's purely there because, oh, we're supposed to establish that she was a rule breaker. And that's the one of only two things you know about her as a person. The next line I wrote down was bad for two reasons. So an elf maid who, by the way, in the show, the elf maids who are servants, I suppose, in Lindon, they wear veils over their faces all the time. It's a very, very weird sight, and it's very strange. But she finds Elton, that's their Elrond, sitting on a tree all alone. And I'm sure it's supposed to recall Frodo in the Fellowship of the Ring, where he's sitting down reading a book, all on his own next to a tree, before Gandalf arrives in the Shire. And here we have Elton sitting down all by himself, up against a tree, writing in his book. But she says to him, "The council regrets to inform you that you won't be permitted to attend to the next session, elf lords only." So in the lore, you're gonna hear me say that a lot. Elrond is an elf lord. His mother was Elwing and his father was Erendil, both of whom have nobility of noble descent. He is an elf lord, so why is he not permitted to attend here? Why did the show change him to not be an elf lord? Can we not have nobility, or can our heroes not be noble? They have to be common and lowborn, because let's face it, this is modern day and we can't have kings and nobles being good people. That's all evil. The feudal system was all evil. Instead, everything's got to be perfectly egalitarian, and we're all comrades of equal measure, right? But then it's also, she mentions a council. And I say this having watched 2 seasons of this show. There is no council. What? There is no council ruling Eregion. It's just Gil-galad, the king, and Elton and Círdan's there for 3 episodes in season 2, but he doesn't do anything administrative wise. So who the hell is the council in this case? It's just some random fluff where you're just, why did you insert this line? It doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't add anything to the characters. Because Elton is not treated like he's some lowborn either. But anyway, that's just a dumb line thrown in there. The next line I wrote down was a line where Elton is greeting Karen, and he's observing her looking at a tapestry depicting elves crossing the sea to Valinor. And Elton then says, "I hear it said when you cross over, you hear a song, one whose memory we all carry, and you are immersed in a light more intoxicating than any sensation." Okay, I'm gonna ask this question: who's told you this? Because elves, when they go to Valinor, it's a one-way trip. You wouldn't know this because obviously no one's gone to Valinor and then come back. So to experience this, who's telling you this? It's just such a weird, bizarre thing to hear someone say. But the next exchange was one that was really stood out. This was the one where I just really did not like Karen's behavior, and it's the one that prompted me to rename Galadriel Karen, because this is just Karen behavior. So Elton is being nice to her, and he tells her, "I want to hear about you," because she's been away for a long time. And he tells her that, "I want to hear about you." And she turns around and says, "Why, Elrond, you really have become a politician." What? How is him asking about you and being like, "Tell me what happened. I want to know what you've been doing since I last saw you." Why is that a politician thing? That's just being nice. And you're supposed to be friends. Like, what? His response, though, is, "You make it sound so grim." So, yes, he was being a politician, but he's supposed to be a friend. Why is him asking about her well-being being treated with such hostility? And he's not rebuffing it at all. So he's admitting that, yes, she's right. But then it goes worse, because she then goes, "I am not some courtier to be placated by idle flattery." I didn't know the elves to have such a low feudal system. But I know they have a feudal system, but they're not the kinds of people who are like, "Oh, where they gossip and flatter each other." This isn't that kind of court. They're much more serious or unserious as well, but not in this way. And it's, again, why is Karen reacting with such hostility to him in this way? But she then follows up saying, "I demand to speak with the king directly." I demand to speak with the king directly. Which, one, like, just straight on being a Karen. But two, she's the commander of the Northern armies, as the show repeatedly tells us. She's one of the highest ranking military officers. Why would she not be giving the king a debrief directly? Like, why does she need to go through Elton, who isn't even an elf lord, apparently? He's just the king's secretary, at most. Like, why does Karen need to demand a meeting? Elton's response then goes, "You have made that plain, so I will be equally plain." What did she made plain? Exactly. She didn't make anything plain. She just said, I want to speak to the king." That she didn't make anything plain. That's not a response to what she said. But it goes on here. It was not your company who defied you out there, but rather you who defied the High King by refusing to heed any limit placed upon you. So apparently she was exceeding her mandate to search to hunting Sauron. And this was alluded to earlier on, but it wasn't really, I didn't really have an issue with it, with the dialogue there. It's more an issue here. Because Elton then continues saying, in an act of magnanimity, he has chosen to honor your accomplishments rather than dwell upon your insolence. And all I could ask was, what accomplishments? She hasn't done anything. She didn't even succeed in the task that she was trying to accomplish, which was find Sauron. She found a fortress that was abandoned, and she found a mark, which, okay, more proof that Sauron is there, but again, she didn't really find much of anything. But she's apparently accomplished things in the past. And again, that's related to, like, how did she get those titles exactly? What has she accomplished? I don't know. Because the show, according to the show's own timeline, she hasn't done anything. And he then finishes off saying, test him again, you will find him less receptive than you might have hoped. Why? What is this faux Shakespearean dialogue? Test him again and you will find him less receptive than you might have hoped. Like, yeah, I get it. Don't push him. Okay? Why are you're spouting words for the sake of spouting words? And of course, Karen, as a typical Karen, is just, are you going to enrage in the audience or not? These two are supposed to be friends, and she has been completely nasty to him in their entire interaction. And again, she accused him of acting like a politician, and he didn't deny it. So I'm not sure. Does he genuinely care about her or not? I don't know, but these two are not giving me friendship vibes at all. The next lines I wrote down came from the Harfoots. And it's another line from Nori where it's supposed to be, oh, I'm such a wistful girl. I just wanna break the mold. I just wanna do things. Because she's like, I can't help but feel there's wonders in this world beyond our wandering. Why? Why do you care about the outside world? Why are you interested? Why are you curious in the outside world? And especially when it's like, well, you guys already wander all over the place. You shouldn't be curious by that logic. Because you're seeing the world. But her stepmother, I should say, because it's revealed this isn't her biological mother. This is her stepmother. Her stepmother, Marigold, goes, elves have forests to protect, dwarves their mines, men their fields of grain. Even trees have to worry about the soil beneath their roots. Hold on, you just said elves have forests to protect. So why do the trees have to worry about the soil beneath their roots if the elves are protecting the forest? What? Did you not just... God. No, I swear these scripts were absolutely AI generated. And I wouldn't be surprised if they were, because Payne and MK, they spent 10 years in J.J. Abrams' basement and couldn't get a single credit to their name. So I would not be surprised if they turned to AI to write up a script for them, because they couldn't make one script work themselves. She then goes, but we Harfoots are free from the worries of the wide world. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're not free from... You literally were hiding earlier from human hunters. You're not free from the worries of the wide world. And in fact, in a later monologue in another episode, Nori will say, "Oh, there's so many perils and things that could kill us." So why is her mother saying they're free from the worries of the wide world? And then she goes on saying, "We are but ripples in a long, long stream. Our paths set by the passing seasons." Is what? This is not a coherent state. These are not coherent statements. This is not a coherent monologue. We're just jumping from one thing to the next like we're schizophrenic. And then they say the mantra of the Harfoots. Nobody goes off trail and nobody walks alone. And I hope you're used to that line because we're going to hear it a lot over the course of this season. She then goes, "We have each other, we're safe, that is how we survive." And that's a big lie. Later episodes will show us nobody goes off trail and nobody walks alone does not mean we have each other, we're safe, and that's how we survive. These do not mean the same thing. The last line I wrote from the Harfoots in this scene was, it wasn't a major line that the show focused on, the scene focused on. It's just one of those pieces of background dialogue that you have where you hear characters just chatting randomly in the background. But it was such a dumb line that I had to write it down. Because Nori's dad is talking to another Harfoot and he says, "That's your problem. See, a wheel is supposed to be round." What? I'm sorry, are there Harfoots among these people that are so dumb that they don't know what the shape of a wheel is? Really? They've been doing this caravan migration shtick for how many years, and you have someone who doesn't know the shape of a wheel? I mean, I know they're all like dirty peasants who look like they don't even understand proper hygiene. So I would doubt the ability of any of them to read beyond Papa Smurf. But that is a level of stupidity I am shocked at. But leaving the Harfoots, we then go back to the elves. And these next lines I recorded are from Gil-galad, or Gillygold as he should be called, because gold is all this man wears. It's part of his commemorative victory speech. And this first one is just such an ugly metaphor where you're just, why was this the image you'd want to conjure in your mind? Because he goes, "These soldiers have swept over crag and crevice, washing away the last remnants of our enemies like a spring rain over the bones of a spoiled carcass." Like, first off, that's a mouthful to say. But also, ew. Why would you want to conjure the image of a rotting carcass being with rain falling on it? That's disgusting. And it's just like washing away. Rain doesn't wash away a corpse. Like if you saw a dead deer in the woods and it had just rained, the rain doesn't wash the carcass away. That's not how that works. A better metaphor would have been, these soldiers have swept over crag and crevice, washing away the last enemies of our remnants of our enemies like a spring rain over snow, or something more like that. Where yes, the rain falls and the snow melts and the water flows. That would make more sense than rain over the bones of a spoiled carcass. Again, it's also just a much less disgusting metaphor, and not something I would expect an elf to make. But then we go to more lore breaking, because Gillygold then says, "These heroes shall be granted an honor unrivaled in all our lore." Well, it's not an honor unrivaled because apparently this has been done many times. as Elton both alluded to earlier, and he will later on. But he then said, Gold then says, they will be escorted to the Grey Havens and granted passage across the sea to dwell for all eternity in the blessed realm, the far west, the undying lands of Valinor. So, just to get this out of the way, no, you do not get to see the Grey Havens in this season. You see them in season 2, and when you see them in season 2, they are nothing special. They are nothing spectacular. The Grey Havens amounted to a single log house, long house made out of logs, and one overgrown tower on a random speck of dirt, a gravel beach. That's the Grey Havens in this show. It's just some random beach hut. But it's also, what do you mean granted passage as an honor? Gil-galad in the lore, he does not have the ability or authority to grant that. That is something all elves have the right to do so. The only ones who can bar passage are the Valar. So why is Gilligold here acting like I'm the one who gives this permission and I give it out as an honor of service? What? Again, these guys claim this is accurate to Tolkien. They respect Tolkien, and they don't even get these basic mechanics right. The next lines, though, are between Elton and Karen, and it's amazing how all their interactions are just garbage. And Elton says something that was so unironically insensitive and tone deaf to say to Karen that for a moment I sympathized with her. Because she is standing in front of the memorial to her brother, who, remember, was murdered by Simpron. And Elton comes over and says, it is said the wine of victory is sweetest for those in whose bitter trials it is fermented. What a jackass thing to say to someone who has lost their sibling in war. This is such a pampered thing to say, where it's just the wine of victory is sweetest for those in whose bitter trials it is fermented. If you know anything about soldiers, it's that their bitter trials do not make wine of victory sweeter. It remains bitter, especially if you've lost somebody or if you're suffering from PTSD, which I'm sure Karen is supposed to be. It's just such an insensitive thing to say, especially in front of her brother's grave. But yeah, the next line is another exchange between them. And Elton's trying to convince her to go on the ship to Valinor. So he goes, it is over. The evil is gone. And Karen says, then why is it not gone from here? Meaning her heart. And he then says, after all you have endured, it is only natural to feel conflicted. What? And then we get another very much memed moment, because Karen scrunches her face and is glaring at Elton like she wants to stab him to death right there. And as her face is twitching in anger, she goes, conflicted? I am grateful you have not known evil as I have, but you have not seen what I have seen. I have seen my share. You have not seen what I have seen. And when she says it the second time, she has what I call the crazy eyes. Like, these are the eyes of someone who's about to snap and lose their sanity. And I cannot believe that in this show we have people trauma measuring with each other. This is such. Why are they trauma measuring? Congrats. Galadriel saw more of the war than Elton did, because canonically, but then I don't know how canon it is, timeline wise, that Elton had his whole home sacked and murdered by the sons of Feanor. He lost his mother and father. He saw the final great battle, the that destroyed Beleriand. He's seen plenty. You've seen a lot of the same things. But here she is trying to trauma measure with him. Where, again, this is so immature and disgusting behavior. And it just keeps going, because Elton then goes, "No one in history has ever refused the call. Do so now, it may never come again." And Karen's response is, "In the West, do you think my fate would be better? Where song would mock the cries of battle in my ears?" Again, I have to point out stolen valor, because Karen, you didn't fight in the war. You only took up the sword after your brother was dead, and he was dead after the war. You did not fight in it. You did not hear the cries of battle. In fact, we were shown that, because you were shown in a very clean dress on cleaning up a battlefield. You weren't there. You didn't fight. But she's become so obsessed with it that she couldn't even stand the idea of people singing. It would be a mockery to her trauma. And again, what is Elton saying? No one in history has ever refused the call. Do so now, it may never come again. So again, it's not an unrivaled gift, because it's been given before. And to do so now, it may never come again. Like, what? Are you saying Gil-galad won't give her the permission again? He wants her gone, obviously. He wants the peace. So why would he not offer it to her again? And again, again in the lore, this is not an offer that the king has the authority to grant. It's something all elves have the ability to take up. The final line between these two is from Elton, and it's such a really stupid sentence. Because he goes, "If but a whisper of the rumor of the threat." And again, I want to repeat that. "If but a whisper of a rumor of the threat you perceive proves true, I will not rest until it is put right. You have fought long enough, Galadriel, put up your sword." If but a whisper of a rumor of the threat. Why is that that's so clunky? Why not just say "if but a whisper of the threat," or "if a rumor of the threat"? Why a whisper of a rumor? Are we trying to like make it so look he's like so serious that it's like, well, if he hears even the slightest bit, he'll immediately jump into action. And it's so clunky and stupid, but it's also funny because he's not gonna. He's immediately gonna break this promise to her. But the next lines we have are all from down south, the future Mordor, where the elves have apparently been running a penal colony for 1,000 years minimum, where they've been confining an entire people to a very small region inside of Mordor, the future Mordor, which I don't want to know how inbred everyone is in this territory then, but it would explain why everyone in the villages look just ugly as sin. Like, there is not anyone who looks clean or properly right. Like, if I was to, I would totally take these people and cast them for if I was trying to make a Lovecraft movie about the people of Innsmouth. where everyone is disheveled, everyone is unkempt and hard to look at and uncomfortable to look at. But we have Arondir, the Sylvan, or maybe he's Sindar. I don't know. I can't really say for sure because they don't really make much of an effort to distinguish the characters. Sorry, I need to fix this quickly. Okay, there we go. Back to it. And so they're in this town. He's part of the um garrison who patrol this place. And the best way I can compare it to is if this was Reconstructionist South right after the Civil War. That's the vibe I get from this place, which is one interesting way to take this because I must have missed the part in the Silmarillion or any of Tolkien's notes where he notes down that, and after the war happened, the elves locked up all the people who were fighting for Morgoth in this very small patch of land that doesn't have much in the way of space, or and they lived there in the dirt for 1,000 years, growing progressively more ugly as the time went on. So Arondir, though, he walks into this tavern and he hears the barman talking about how there was some poisoned grass. And Arondir inquires it, and then the guy who I can only call him the racist boy, because that's what he is. He just randomly out of nowhere slams his drink onto his alcohol onto his table and just goes, "Let it go, knife ears. It's a bloody patch of grass. The lot you lump us in with died off 1,000 years ago. When are you people gonna let the past go?" It was just okay. Knife ears is not an insult I've ever heard Tolkien. I've heard it from Dragon Age or other things, but not Tolkien. And then he's just the lot you, and then he's like, "Let it go, knife ears. It's a bloody patch of grass. The lot you lump us in with died off 1,000 years ago." These sentences do not flow together. These are two completely different things. But for some reason, and again, someone had to write this if it wasn't AI generated. They wrote these sentences and didn't notice, hey, there's a gap in logic here, in follow through. Like we went from A to C and we skipped point B. And it's like, the lot you lump us in with died off 1,000 years ago. When are you people gonna let the past go? Like, wow. This is as racially charged as it can get. It doesn't help either that it's a black... This is being said to a black elf. It's... Whoa. It's so on the nose and blunt. But honestly, there's complete justification for this animosity because the elves have kept these people under military occupation for 1,000 years. At that point, yeah, you should have some resentment towards them because you've grown up your whole life, and your ancestors, and then your ancestors before that, and your ancestors before that, under the boot. I mean, imagine if like people who bring up the evils of slavery from America today. Imagine if slavery had been going on in America for 1,000 years and it was still going on today. Yeah, there would absolutely be more than justified resentment towards it. But Arondir's then his response is, "The past is with us all, whether we like it or not." The past isn't with these people. It's been 1,000 years. I think they've more than shown that they give like past the sentence, especially for an entire race of people, or maybe not a race, because the humans in the show are all as mixed as possible. They don't have a single race. It's just the only thing that defines men is their geographic location. And but racist boy then goes on randomly again, where it's just okay. This is as they're so bluntly trying to set this up. One day our true king will return and pry us out from under your pointy boots. I'm to adjust the latter half. I was like, I don't think the elves' boots are very pointy in this show. I didn't get a good look at Arondir's shoes, but they didn't look very pointy. In fact, I haven't seen any elves with very pointy boots. But this part, one day our true king will return. This is again a very blunt setup for something that's going to happen later on. That there's such a dumb fallout, but I can't really explain it without until we get to the follow through. But the next line exchange is between our star-crossed lovers, our Romeo and Juliet, Bronwyn and Arondir. And they're having a conversation, and Bronwyn, who is the town medic, asks Arondir the elf, "Are there healers among your kind?" And Arondir says, "There are, but we call them artificers. Most wounds to our bodies heal of their own accord, so it is their labor instead to render hidden truths as works of beauty." What? Okay, that's every word he just said is completely made up. And also, I'm gonna remember this because I don't want to hear any elf ever say heals or healers, take them to the artificers. But it's also, most wounds of our bodies heal of their own accord. No, you still have medicine. You still have elvish medicine and healing arts and stuff. And it's like their labor instead to render hidden truths as works of beauty. How does that that has nothing to do with the previous statement? Because it's like, well, if again it's a healer, what do you mean render a hidden truth as a work of beauty? What? The next exchange is between Arondir and his companion, the Stinky Elf. And I know he's Stinky Elf because Arondir goes, "I think you talk too much, and you smell of rotten leaves." "No, I don't." "Yes, you do." Why are the elves acting like sixth graders? It's like, "Oh, you smell bad." "No, I don't." "Yes, you do." This is not elvish behavior. And what do you mean he smells of rotten leaves? What? Ugh. These are not elves at all. These are not elves as Tolkien wrote about them. These are not elves as Tolkien has ever discussed about them. Then the Stinky Elf goes, "Only twice in known history has a pairing between elves and humans even been attempted." So this is supposed to be referring to Beren and Luthien, and Tuor and his wife. Or not Tuor. Erendil's father. I'm sorry, I can't remember it properly. Off the top of my head. His name always escapes me. But it's like, only twice in... Yeah, in fact, there's only 3 canonical pairings, but here we're gonna flirt with the idea that, oh no, there's actually more. And it's just they know exactly how many, and yet they're gonna break that rule anyway. And again, continuing the trend from earlier where the elves just make up random words to explain normal things. The Arondir's captain asks him, "What were you before the war?" And Arondir answers, "A grower." "You mean a farmer?" Why a grower? Why not just say a farmer? What? Can you guys not use normal words for things that already exist? Like, why are we trying to make up new fantasy words for things that already exist? And they're not even good fantasy words at all. Like, at least say farmer in Elvish or something. But no, you're just gonna say a grower. God, this dialogue is so terrible. The next dialogue exchanges between Bronwyn and her son Theo, who sounds like I swear he sounded like somebody who had to. He talks so rough and rascally. Like, man, I think he's been smoking so many packs of cigarettes. But Bronwyn says, "You're in a boil this morning." What? You're in a boil this morning? Okay, weird metaphor, but it's kind of understandable. Then Theo goes, "Hardly slept. Mice were dancing a proper jig under the floorboards." This line sounds like something a hobbit would say. It does not sound like something a human would say, though. Not to mention, if he couldn't sleep because of mice under the floorboards, and newsflash, it wasn't mice under the floorboards. He was actually hearing something else. Why couldn't Bronwyn hear it? Why wasn't she bothered at all? Especially because of especially for where the digging is taking place, so to speak. It's not in his room. It's not. It's in the center of their house, of their little hovel. So why could he hear it? Does he sleep right there or what? I don't know. But we're just gonna very bluntly try to set up something. The next line is also from Theo, and this is again a line that does not feel like something a human would say. But Theo and Race's boy have broken into the barn that belongs to the tavern owner. Of course, they don't tell you whose barn it is. And Theo randomly knows that there's a keyblade under these floorboards because he saw it being hidden under there. But I don't know how he would have seen this if it's inside the barn. But Theo goes, "Salty rascals got the king's bounty down there." The king's bounty? The salty rascal? What? Okay, whatever. There's just more weird lines we're trying to make up. Just sound fantastical. It's also funny because it's not a king's bounty. It's a broken hilt of a keyblade. That's all it is. It's not the king's bounty. Like a king's bounty would be if there was gold or a crown down there, not some broken sword hilt. But whatever. We then jump all the way back with the elves. And Gilly Gold is with Elton, and they're witnessing Karen being sailed off to Valinor. And the exchange they have goes, Gilly Gold says, "We foresaw that if she might have inadvertently kept alive the very evil she sought to defeat. For the same wind that seeks to blow out a fire may also cause its spread." Okay, so first off, you could cut the second line. The same wind, you don't need that. You've explained yourself already with the first sentence. It's all done. He's just talking for the sake of talking. Because everyone has to have long, drawn-out talking sequences. But Elton rightly hits on exactly what he's saying, because he goes, "Then the shadow she sought, you believe it does exist." So Gilly Gold has admitted that yes, there is evil out there, and we're worried that Galadriel's searching would stir it up. Why? Isn't that the whole point? You search out the evil, and you defeat it so it doesn't hurt you. Because if you've left evil alone, it's gonna come after you eventually. And Elton realizes, he should realize right there, uh-oh, there's the whisper of the rumor of the threat I promised to go hunt. My king has just confirmed it. But Gilligold just tells him, set your mind at peace about it. And yeah, that's it. Elton just completely drops it. Doesn't bother and be like, oh crud, I better go set out and find out what this evil is. Tell me more, King. Nope, he just drops it. So he breaks his promise to Karen immediately. But Gilligold and Elton continue having this exchange, and the next lines I had picked out were Elton saying, "It is hard to see what is right when friendship and duty are mingled." That line itself is actually not too bad. It's a it's a little clunky Shakespearean, but I get what he's saying. It's hard to choose the right thing between friendship and duty when they overlap with each other. It's Gilligold's response that makes the exchange nonsensical. Because he goes, such is the burden of those who lead and those who seek to. Huh? That's not a response to what he just said. What do you mean it's hard to see what is right when friendship and duty are mingled, and that's the burden of those who lead and those who seek to? What? That's these two things do not go together. You're talking about two different things at this point. And I'm just like, it's just a constant thing where it's just, why do characters always talk past each other? And it's only going to get worse as these episodes go on. But Gilligold continues saying, Galadriel sails to the sunset. You and I must look to the new sunrise. Okay. Galadriel sailing to the sunset. That's true in a literal sense because she's going west. Sun rises in the east, sets in the west. She's going west. She's also going to Valinor, metaphorically. Although, why you would compare going to Valinor to a sunset is a bit concerning to me because the sunset is the closing, the end, the beginning of night. So she's sailing to the last light to darkness? What? But then he goes, you and I must look to the new sunrise. Which, Galadriel's one works on two levels. Like I said, it works on the literal, she's sailing west to the sunset, but it also works on the metaphorical. Gilligold's next line, though, you and I must look to the new sunrise, only works in a metaphorical sense, because to look to the new sunrise, they'd have to look east. And there's nothing for them east. They're not going east. So it's like to the new sunrise. This doesn't make sense. It's just it's just another line that's trying to be poetic for no reason other than, well, Tolkien's writing is poetic, so we gotta be poetic. And these guys clearly do not know how to write Tolkien at all. They can't sound like Tolkien. They don't know how to make dialogue that even feels like it fits in its own world. But the last few lines I have written down for the first episode were an exchange between Sadak and Nori. Because Sadak is noticing how things feel off. There's something in the air going on. And he's reading through this book, this almanac, essentially, is what it is. And he's going like, first the big people, now the stars. So he's referring to the big people, of course, is the name that Harfoots, well, not Harfoots, hobbits have for humans, for men. But he's going, now the stars. Eyes wide when they should be sleeping. So Sadak is saying the stars are out when they shouldn't be. But how does that relate to the big people? Like, the eyes wide when they should be sleeping is not something that makes any sense for what in the context of the big people, the humans that we saw, because they were hunting in the day. They shouldn't be asleep or anything. This is such a weird sentence, a weird conclusion. And then he's like, almost like they're watching for something. Again, this can only work in relation to the stars. It does not work if you're trying to tie this in with the humans that you saw earlier. If anything, it should be, the big people were hunting earlier than they should have been, and now the stars are out, eyes wide when they should be sleeping. Instead, they combined two things that don't work together. Then Nori pokes her head out, being like, "Oh, watching for what?" So she's like spying on him. And then Seta goes, "A tongue lashing if you don't mind your own cartwheels." Okay. That's a bit harsh. But whatever. Then this line from Arondir to Bronwyn, whereas I I still don't really know. The show has not made it clear, and did not make it clear how long Arondir and Bronwyn were together, or even if they are officially together, or what their relationship is. But this line from Arondir kind of sealed it for me, where he goes, "You're the only kind touch I've known in all my days in this land." I don't need to know that. That's a bit too much information. I didn't need to know you guys were physical with each other. Also, the only kind touch? What, like, did your stinky elf buddy not give you a reach around or something? God, so stupid. Oh god, I hate that this line put this in my head. But the final line of the episode comes from Finbro, and it's the answer to what he whispered to Karen. And it betrays a complete fundamental misunderstanding and even betrayal of Tolkien's morality. Because Finbro tells her, "Sometimes we cannot know until we have touched the darkness. Sometimes we cannot know the truth and which way to go until we have touched the darkness." That is not how morality works in Tolkien at all. No, you reject darkness. This is something that Saruman would have said to try to convince someone that, sometimes we gotta do evil to discover true goodness. No. You reject evil in its entirety. You do not touch the darkness to know the light. And that is exactly what it means, because this is repeated several times in that context in the show. That we have to discover light by passing through darkness. We have to do some evil to find the good. This is such a terrible, horrible thing to say. That the single line tells you these writers do not understand Tolkien. They have rejected his morality. They've rejected the morality of Middle Earth in its entirety. Instead, they're going to do the postmodernist thing, where it's like, well, good and bad are points of view, purely subjective. Which it's like, to agree with that is to court evil itself. But that was the final line from episode 1. Overall, episode 1 gave me 4 pages of terrible dialogue. And honestly, this is the episode which has the best dialogue, because the next 7 episodes, it only gets worse and worse and worse. Characters will get progressively dumber. Statements will make less sense. The first episode is the kindest because it doesn't have much established to go off of. But even already, there's been a lot of inconsistencies with characters. People jumping to conclusions that they really should not be, or lines that contradict established lore to to the world of Tolkien and its background that completely break the universe. And it's only going to get worse and worse from as we go along. But as it stands, that's everything for tonight's episode, and I will hopefully see you all next time. Peace out.